All right, I'm Silas Gibbs with Duotech Services, and we're here today to talk with Christopher Ott, our software lead, and a little bit about our software development and bidding process. Chris has been with us for a little while and just really helped to bring our software development process to the place where it is currently. Chris, a couple things that we want to talk about is maybe what does that development process look like, and how do you start planning the approach and putting a bid together when you're working on a software project. So I guess maybe give us a first high-level view, like what kind of steps are involved in a software development process that has to be considered when we're planning a project.
Sure. Well, every project starts with somebody coming to us needing something done, and that generally kicks off sort of the requirements gathering phase of the project. It's always useful if the individual knows, or if the group coming to us knows what they want. If not, we work with them to define those requirements. From that point forward, we would look at design. What's the best approach for how to kind of break down the problem, what implementations might look like for them. And then after that, we've always got to consider the documentation and deployment. That's kind of the high-level approach of what we would look at.
Right, so if we break that down, you talked about requirements gathering. So first off, we get some kind of a problem statement, and that could be pretty general or it could be pretty specific.
Yeah.
How does it change what you do depending on what that request looks like?
Well, it's always great if the customer knows exactly what they want. A lot of times that can break down into some very specific goals as far as the requirements are concerned, and requirements that are very detailed often lead to very detailed implementation goals. So it's always nice to have those. If we don't have those, then we tend to try and work with the customer to identify what exactly their needs are, break those requirements down, and a lot of times that may be several iterations of meetings, design, feedback loop type of thing that leads to ultimately some requirements that we can begin to work with.
Sure, and so what are some of the things that you use to kind of present the customer with maybe some concepts while you're going through that phase?
Sure, well, depending on what the customer is requesting, we might bring up some of our prior designs that we've done as far as database implementation work, user interface to those data stores. If it's a situation where we're doing a hardware type of application, then maybe we've got some existing products that we've done in the past, or some things that exist in the market that we might bring up and get some comparison contrast to try and determine what it is they're looking for. And then oftentimes it's a situation where the customer has some product that they want to upgrade or re-implement or redesign, and so we would start from there and kind of build off of that.
Sure. And I know we've built sketches and mock-ups and wireframes and things like that to kind of present things to the user as well.
Sure.
We're trying to just get them to tell us what they want.
Sure, yeah, we will use a lot of kind of off-the-shelf software for just simple UI mock-up, simple kind of table design, flow charting, those types of things.
Sure. So once you get that down, you start looking at the detailed design, kind of break down, I guess, user interfaces, databases like you mentioned, communications channels, processing algorithms and all that sort of thing. How do you predict how long something like that takes?
It's difficult. You'll find throughout the industry that software estimation is sort of a very ephemeral thing. It's tough to get right. A lot of times you build off of existing knowledge. You can know fairly reliably how long it'll take to set up a certain type of a database with a certain type of interface. And that's where a lot of times the requirements will actually lead to a more accurate requirements give you a more accurate estimate than necessarily the design will. Because if the requirements change, then your estimate is thrown off. But by and large, if you've got a good understanding of the requirements and the technology you need to use to implement, then your estimations can come in a lot of times based on existing experience with the problem.
Sure. So put a design together, and then you and your team work to implement that design. What kind of, in summary, does that kind of look like here at Duotech?
Just a general workflow?
Yeah, general workflow.
Well, we'll generally kick it off with a few design meetings where we will try to kind of whittle down exactly what the architecture of the problem might look like, or the solution would look like, and then we would divvy out that work based on reasonable implementation expectations for an individual. We'll do a lot of iteration through, maybe if it's a communication situation where we've got inter-process communication, we'll design some frameworks for that communication to test it out and make sure that things work the way we expect. We're always looking for sort of a modular approach anywhere that we can. That's more difficult sometimes with hardware applications, but with some of the higher level applications, it's quite easy to implement good modular programming. And in those situations, we can just break those modules out. We can mock up testing frameworks. We can do unit testing, so we can allow individuals to develop outside of the application as a whole, and then bring those things together based on the specification, and we should have good product.
You mentioned kind of the documentation, kind of deployment phase. What is, when you talk deployment, what do you mean by that?
It's probably the more difficult thing to nail down when it comes time to actually release the product. How does the customer want to get it? In the case of pure software-driven requirement, that's really not that difficult. We can distribute in several different forms of media. We can do downloads online, MSIs, EXEs, whatever we need to do for installation. When it comes to actual hardware deployment, software on hardware, then we have to consider the limitations of that hardware. Is it going to be in a plane when it needs to be deployed or updated? Does the hardware need to be coming back to us in order to have the installation performed? Does our customer have limitations, either physical or I guess company limitations that policy limitations that would prevent them from being able to use certain types of deployment. So in that situation, getting those things done required up front, it's always good.
So it can look very different from project to project.
Oh yes.
Yeah. For those. So just been able to talk through a little bit of that process through the thing. If someone was to say, what kind of sets the development process at Duotech different from other places you've seen or been or worked at, what would you say?
Well, I feel like, given the experiences that I've had at other places and the experiences that you hear about through the grapevine, I feel like that we do a good job of applying good development practices, proper testing, proper setup, proper build. If continuous integration is a useful thing for this particular project, then always using the technology that makes sense, but using it in a strict manner, ensuring that we're following some decent protocols for software development, and not just kind of cowboy coding, as it were, or kind of going off the rails, doing some things and coming back and hoping that they all work together. So taking a much more structured approach than what I have seen or read about through some channels.
Yeah, and definitely here at Duotech, quality and meeting customer requirements are what drives our processes, and whether that is hardware, software, being able to integrate that, doing both in the same building and keeping that very tightly coupled, that just improves the quality and the product the customer gets. Whether you have a detailed requirement for implementation or you just have a problem that needs a solution that you want investigated, Duotech Services and our teams are here ready to help develop the software product that'll meet your needs. If you want to learn more, follow us on YouTube or on Twitter. Come back for more information.